The old long-haired limey here again. Mind you, it's a little shorter now because I got it cut. But anyway, my project today is to change a back wheel bearing, solely because the little magnet in the back of it is broken. The magnet cost about 20 cents. I guess some crazy glue would glue it in, but guess what? $295 Canadian money, that is. Probably about $100 in the US. And we have ourselves another job to do. The 2012 Buick LaCrosse. I've just repaired the ABS on the front. The connections were corroded, so that was another big job. So I repaired that, and I was getting an error code saying intermittent wheel sensor. And when I checked it out, the back wheel, I found the magnet was broken in the back. So now I have to replace the whole hub at considerable cost. There is the new bearing, and that's the magnet right in there. If I could just replace the magnet, it would be fine. But I have to replace the whole wheel bearing. Another wonderful design from GM. Sure, you loosen all the wheel nuts, and you can't have the parking brake on because you need to remove the rotor and braking system. So loosen all the wheel nuts while the car is sitting on the ground. My favourite shock is the spare wheel under the back tyre. Always seems safe enough for me. Anyway, now you've got to jack the car up. You've got to make sure that you're using the jack right underneath the jack point. Sorry, which are hard to see, but they're right there. So the jack has to go onto this. You can jack it up from there. That's it, just make sure that the jack is sitting properly. It sits in the groove on the jack. And then you can work on the car relatively safely. Put some jack stands underneath it as well when we get the wheel off. The magnet is on the back of the wheel hub, right at the back of the car. Probably cannot see it in here now, but there we go. The magnet is, which I can't point to, right there. Okay, so because the magnet is broken, I have to replace it. The error code was telling me that there was an intermittent wheel sensor, and that was the problem. Now I've got to put an axle stand underneath, probably right underneath here. The car is now safely onto an axle stand, plus the car jack. If you don't have an axle stand, I use sometimes a spare car jack that I've collected over the years. Either way, you're going to be doing a lot of work with the socket wrench and stuff, so it needs to be safe. You need a 13mm socket, and first thing to do is to remove the brake pads. You've got to undo this here and one below. Okay, so down here. So once them two are removed, you pull the pins out, and then you can remove the whole caliper. Always a good idea just to hang the thing up with a cable tie. Just these things, just hang it up so it's not hanging onto the cable, onto the pipe itself. Okay, and doing any damage, and it gets it out of your way as well when you're working. Zip tie, now it's out of the way. You've got to remove the rest of the stuff. The old brake pads, they're not that old actually, anyway. I won't be replacing them for sure. Next you have to remove the brake hanger and these nuts here and bolts. Okay, one up the top, one down the bottom. Remove them and then you can take this whole thing right off. 16mm socket will do the job. Undo them. Like I say, there's two of them, one at the top, one at the bottom. I'm sure you'll be able to figure that out. Okay, when you take the bolts out, you'll see that they've had Loctite on them. The yellow stuff. The red Loctite is mine. When I did a brake job, I used red Loctite. Well, a little bit tough to get out sometimes, but so there's the carrier off. Leave the brake pads in there unless they need servicing. No reason to pull them out. Okay. That's that stuff off so far. Now we've got to remove the rotor itself. Okay, a couple of screws in there, we've got to get them out. One screw there. Of course it's Torx, so hopefully you've got a Torx wrench. I have sockets with Torx wrenches up to, I don't know what, 50 T50 or something like that. There you go, that's my Torx wrench. It goes up to T55. I'm not sure which size we need right now, but you know, I have adequate tools to do any job I need to within reason. I'm going to choose one of these right now. T30 is the size that I need. 3/8 drive socket. And undo that, and then we should be able to remove the hub. What should I say? The disc. Remove the rotor, sometimes they get stuck, so they do take a little bit of care to make sure you don't damage it. If you're taking an old rotor off and you're replacing it, who gives a shit? But right now I need to get a rubber hammer or something equivalent and try to pry this rotor loose, because what happens is they get rusted right around here and cause problem. Trouble is, if you put anti-rust oil on there, then it will get onto the rotor, and you don't want to do that really. So, well, it was pretty tough to get off, but my solution was to use a hammer and just hit here, in here, give it a few sharp taps, and then use a piece of wood to protect the wheel, and pry bar I put in behind right here. The pry bar goes in here close to that thing, and the wood goes in between onto the disc, and just give it a sharp pull and hopefully she could come off for you. Don't forget just to hit this part of the wheel right here. You know, don't go and hit here because you're going to damage it and there's no use anymore to you. Or don't hammer the back of the wheel, back of the rotor, I'm sorry, calling it a wheel. Okay, it's loose, and off she comes. And on to the next piece, okay? Oh, there's the hub that we got to remove. That's got 3 big bolts on the back of it, so we got to get them from behind. So if you have some sort of penetrating oil or something, it's probably a good idea to put it onto them bolts. Okay, and then we've got to remove this. Here's the stuff I use. I'm going to spray that behind on the bolts at the back. Okay, just make sure that you remove your brake shoes and don't get anything near them. But we'll get them out of the way. And now we got to spray that. Okay, so you've got 3 of them to do. I can't see. Anyway, you got the idea. We do all 3 of them. Need an 18mm socket. Get onto the back there and take her off. Okay. Put give the penetrating oil a few minutes to settle in to do its job. The bottom bolt probably can only access with a regular wrench, so unfortunately you can't get in there with a socket wrench. Get this piece, to get this wheel bearing off, you're going to need a puller or some hammer. If you don't have one, don't even try the job. Okay, here's what I got. I work in the machine shop, so I have access to this stuff. I just use it as a slide hammer. Okay, and you can get the bearing off like that. And hopefully, next thing you got to clean all the rust out of here. I scraped it out with a screwdriver first. Okay, you've got to be careful not to touch the sensor, the ABS sensor, right here. Okay, don't damage that. Okay, so we've got to try and clean that out. The bearing only sits in the first little piece here. Behind is just clearance. But anyway, nice to get it clean. Much easier to put the bearing in properly. You won't be able to remove this bottom bolt. There's no room for it to come out. So the only way that will come out is if you take all of this apart. I'm sure you don't want to do that. So just push it in out the way. Clean these faces. Clean all around there. Clean in the bore a bit more. I have a little bit more work to do. Use the little Dremel to clean it up. Clean it up with the Dremel. Obviously you don't want to sand it so it's bigger than it should be. Just clean it up and that's all. You can clean this part as well. Okay. Usually I use a little bit of WD-40. Works wonders on all this sort of stuff. Okay. I've cleaned up most of the wheel. All the faces, things. I'm sure it'll survive like that. Anyway, here we go. Put a drop of anti-seize on there. Always a good idea. So the next poor sucker who has to take the bearing off won't have so much trouble. Hopefully it won't be me. And got to put some Loctite onto the screws. Okay, so I'm putting some thread lock on the screw. Obviously this screw I can't take out, so I'll have to put it on here. The other ones I can do it from the back. So that's the next step. Okay, we're going to install the bearing. Installed the back plate, cleaned it up. Like I said, a bit of WD-40. Now put some Loctite on the screws. Okay, now we've got to put the hub in. We've got to make sure we pull it in evenly on all the screws. Make sure it doesn't go in off center, because otherwise you're going to cause trouble. Get this flange evenly spaced all around, all 3 bolts in there. Okay, nice even gap all the way around, and then you can pull it in. Only located by about 1/8 of an inch, so it's really not very much. So obviously you've got to tighten up the bolts. Now I don't know where the specs are or what the specs are, but just use some common sense and tighten it up with a good wrench, nice and tight. If you can find the specs online, well, good luck to you. Everything's assembled now, everything's in the right place. You've got to watch this plate. There is 2 sets of holes it could be put in, so make sure you put it into the right set. Otherwise it'll be in the wrong position. Okay, it's all tightened up. And everything's nice. Bit of Loctite on all the threads, bit of anti-seize on the bearing part. And there we go. Now we've got to assemble brakes, put them back, and then you can look at this video. It takes about half an hour and the whole job will probably take you most of the day. It's really not that easy. It always looks easy on the internet. My new hub has no place to put the screw, so that will have to be left out, unfortunately. Guess that's what happens when you buy aftermarket stuff. Oh well, you can survive just well without it. Okay, reassemble the brake hanger. I did service the pins there, put some anti-seize on them as well, just to make sure they're okay. And now I just got to put the actual caliper on. Okay, the breaker caliper's all assembled now. Just make sure everything's okay, make sure the rubber boots are back on here. Okay, top and bottom, make sure they're tightened up. Make sure the carrier bolts are tightened up right here. Okay, don't want anything to go wrong. And don't forget to remove the axle stand. And then you put the wheel on, even though that one screw's missing there. As soon as you put the wheel on, it pushes the rotor back up against the flat surface, and it should be just fine. And that's about it. So you should only have one screw left over if you've got the same situation I have. And that's all because of a 10-cent magnet right in the end of there, broken in little bits. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with the bearing. I never heard any noise from the back of the car or anything like that. So this is only a brake job on a 2012 Buick LaCrosse. Okay, so you can see the model. This is the fully loaded model, so it's the type of car. You might have an easier job on a different car, I have no idea. Anyway, goodbye from the old Limey again, and good luck to you if you're trying to change your rear wheel bearing or hub, or you got the problem with the ABS, which is what I had. Not the actual wheel bearing, just an ABS problem. I have an OB2 reader which can reset all the codes. Everything should be alright. I'll let you know in a few minutes. Okay, set my torque wrench up to 100 pounds. Okay, if you don't have a torque wrench, just use your common sense. The wrench for the wheel wrench, usually the regular adult should be able to put the right amount of torque on there without going crazy. Anyway, I have a torque wrench, so I'm going to torque them up to 100 foot-pounds.